Part 2 of how just reading these comic books led me to eventually be in the movie Conan the Barbarian and actually be in the comic book that was specifically written for the movie Conan the Barbarian. I would like to go through this comic book to show you the different parts that I played or related to that weren't in the film, that the comic book doesn't totally follow the film, but here we go. Sandal, I told you, was my first job was to massage her through the 5 months because she was climbing towers and her stunts. Then I specifically got into the film to be with Arnold for the 5 months and be with him day in, day out, and train with him and learn from him and be part of this whole film. He told people that I brought a lot of spirit to the film. So as we flip through these pages, I would like to point out the different things. Now, it follows the movie, the comic book follows the movie somewhat. It's got parts that aren't in the movie, and it was different. It was changed in the movie from the script because certain things did not work in filming. For instance, here we have Arnold was going to be let free from his pit fighting. So he was in this cell reading, and then supposedly an earthquake opened up the cell walls. Well, in the film, as much as the special effects guys like Nick Alder try to recreate the movement of the film with the shaking of the camera and the dropping of dirt from above, it didn't work. So Milius had to rewrite the scene where the master of slave of Arnold sets him free. That's just one part that you didn't know, that again, the earthquake scene that they tried to film according to the script just didn't work. So in the comic book, off Arnold goes, and the dogs attack him, and he goes into the cave, and he gets a sword, and then he comes to a lady, a witch lady actually, and he starts to eventually make love. Now this gal herself became a good friend of mine, and we would go out on the weekends in Spain and just ride around, and she, if I would have stayed in Spain, which I could have, she would have gotten me more work. Beautiful lady for sure. Then off Arnold goes, he meets Jerry Lopez Subutai in the movie, and they go traveling to this fort over here. It's Fort Condor, as I believe. Interesting time I had with Arnold at this fort. Now, they start walking through the grounds of the fort, and during that time, there was like 465 gypsies that were hired to be part of the fill-in people there. I played a part where I was tied to the neck with 5 other guys, and we were like prisoners walking through this crowd of donkeys and elephants and people. And it was quite hilarious because if you've ever tried walking with 5 other guys that speak Spanish and you try to ferret through the donkeys in the crowd, one guy pulls on the neck, the other neck gets pulled, the other neck gets pulled, and it was quite hilarious for us to try to go through this crowd. In fact, it messed up one scene where one Spanish guy was kind of laughing as he got closer and closer to the camera, because the tugging on the neck just made us kind of laugh. So a scene had to be more serious. The Spanish guy had to shape up. Also, what we saw while we were walking through the crowd, which was pretty hilarious, we saw this guy sitting in front of a booth, and an elephant this is before a filming, before Milius called action, and the elephant took a huge dump. In fact, the dump was so big, it was almost as big as the Spanish person sitting on the ground. And then, and we started, that's why the Spanish guy started cracking up. because of the scene of this elephant just before Milius called action, and Milius didn't see this, that the elephant had this steamy big pile in front of this little Spanish guy. And also, the elephant took a pee that was like a river. And as the river went, you'd see these Spanish ladies yelping because it was coming through their booth. Okay, so Arnold goes walking into the Condor. It was called Fort Condor, I believe. And then here's something that was not in the movie. It was a caravan with this lady on top of the caravan. And the reason you didn't see it is, as Rafaela de Laurentiis, the producer, said to me, 50 miles was filmed, and in the movie we saw 1 mile. Now, to set up this scene, Arnold had to be in costume, but before he could come out, they actually placed me in lieu of Arnold to go through this scene in rehearsals. And it was a trip to be standing in for Arnold and watch this caravan and this pretty lady stare at me saying her lines. And I went, wow, how lucky Arnold is to experience this. So Arnold gets past this caravan, and they go to the place, to the tower off in the distance. And that's where they want to steal some jewels. Now, this tower scene here was right next to where you saw the pit fights. It was just next door. And this is Sandal Bergman's leg, or Valeria in the movie. Now, I watched this whole entire scene over and over again, where they met, they challenged, and then they worked together to climb up this scene. Now, the very first day that I arrived on the scene and I was working out in the little gym, Sandal and Arnold and me were in this gym. And Sandal said, "Who is this guy over there in the gym?" And he said, "Oh, that's Conan. He's from Aspen, and he was hired to be the massage therapist." She had been spending 3 days climbing this tower. So she came over to me in the little gym. Again, this was my first day, first night. And I put her on, she said her back was hurting. So I put her on a weight bench and I fixed her back. I'm really hot as a massage therapist. And that moment, that next day, she went to the producers in the set and talked about me and said, "Hire this guy." And again, it took me 3 days to find out that I was the talk of the set for 3 days. And I got hired 3 days later because of her soreness from her back climbing that tower. Now here's a significant thing. Here's a well with some ropes. And so they climb the ropes to get up. Why I say that is significant, because what you don't see in the actual comic book is what happened and how they escaped. It was a stunt I had to do. But let me get to this point here. So now they're in this this temple, and this behind you see all these girls. These girls were Spanish girls. They were 15 to about 18. And I became friends with them because they saw me at work as a massage therapist. My job was to work on people that were through the movie when there was no cameras on. Now, on the bus ride to this scene, the girl that you see here, I massaged in the bus to prepare her for her jump. She had to jump into the pit. She was a stunt chick. But where I was with these girls is hiding behind the columns that were there for these scenes, because I would disappear, and then when Milius would call cut, I would work on people doing some massage work on shoulders. Like, for instance, here's Sandal or Valeria hiding behind a column. That's where I was during the filming of this, and then would pop out to do the massage. Here's the snake. It was a 60-foot rubber snake. And I would see that in the mornings as I walked and prepared myself to do my observing of the scene, the filming, and doing massage work in between on Milius, etc. So now they go after the jewel. The snake gets awoken, and he fights the snake. Now, Nick Alder, the special effects guy, and I became really good friends. He was from England, and I was from Aspen, but I actually helped him with some mathematical models because he built the snake, part of the snake, for the film. They had a 60-foot rubber snake, but part of the film that was mechanical, he built, and he needed a differential formula. Because I was a math major at UCLA, I came up with it for him. So I was glad to help him out in that way. So Arnold fights this rubber snake, and he pretends to be coiled up. And then he sticks his sword in the lower part of the snake, and he shoots a bow and arrow. Now, the actual bow and arrow was shot by Terry Leonard, the stunt coordinator. And then Arnold fights the snake, and then he gets a sword and slices the head off. Now, in between that head and the slice point was a little explosion. There was a way of separating the head not with a sword stroke, but with an explosion. So the girl that I massaged prior to the stunt, and there was very few people allowed in this filming because she actually was topless. And in Spain, they tried to find us. They did as much protocol to keep the scenes as whatever. I like the girl topless personally. So then they start to escape, and they're actually in the film. There was the well that they climbed down. It was actually a stunt that I did. They changed it from them climbing out of the tower and jumping to stabbing me in the thigh at the lip of the well, and Sandal would put a noose around my neck and pitch me over, and as I fell with a noose around my neck, it would pull up Arnold and them up to the top of the tower so that they could escape. So off they enjoy their success, and the king awards them with jewels and a task that find my daughter. So off Arnold would go, and I was there for these filmings. I was there for when these hippie people were walking in the desert, and they were like little Spanish hippie people. And he went to the burial mounds, and these mounds were pretty interesting. They had lots of styrofoam punji stakes. They were still very dangerous to ride around. So, as it goes, Arnold eventually gets to where the tower is. I spent many days on this tower, and in this scene actually there was just 6 of us guards in leathers. It was so fun to be with them alone on the tower, because while this scene was being filmed down here, when it's called action, we were supposed to be walking up and down the tower. You could barely see it in the actual film. But these 5 other guys, we were dressed up in full-on battle armor. And because I was the only American, very few Americans, and there was like 600 Spanish people in the other scenes, but on this particular temple at that time, they would pass me a Boda bag of wine because they would sneak wine, drink it in between takes. So we actually got drunk on the tower, and it was fun to be wearing the leathers as guards as we walked up and down the towers. Eventually, another part I would play would be on those temple steps as a priest. That was more boring than those leathers that I wore. So now, Arnold goes in and he meets James Earl Jones, and James Earl Jones captures him and flogs him and runs him into a fountain. Now, in this scene, actually, James Earl Jones coaxes a girl to jump, like a 30-foot stunt. And again, as a massage therapist the night before, you don't see it in this comic book, but I had to massage her to calm her down, and she successfully jumped. And I was actually positioned on the hillside above her to make sure she stayed calm for the 30-foot jump into a balsa wood platform. Again, you don't see that here. By the way, these helmets were rubber. Now this scene here was pretty amazing. This is a pivoting tree, and it took them 3 hours to set these vultures up because it was fiberglass. They didn't realize the vultures couldn't hook onto the limbs, and so they would jump off. And it was one of the hilarious times where you'd see this large vulture running off into the desert with her little trainer that was about the size of the vulture trying to capture it. In this scene, Arnold is sitting there. Now, I had some interesting times there because this is on the beach of the Mediterranean, and as a surfer, I was just soaking up, being tan. I was actually off on the other dunes in between the setups with some of those Spanish girls that were there just to watch the scene too, and I'd be sunbathing and they'd be topless. It was so cool because they trusted me, except that I was very happy to be topless with them on the beach. Then there's a scene where Arnold bites off the neck. Let's see if that's coming up. The neck of a vulture. And I was actually in the office of Milius when the stuntman, or the handler, the vulture handler, had shown Milius that they had a dead vulture and that they were going to fix it up to do the bite scene of Arnold, and they were going to soak the neck in like bourbon so that the feathers would taste better. So now Jerry Lopez, or Subutai, comes and takes and saves Arnold. Now, he's in a trance or beat up, and then it's a scene of the demons trying to take him away, and Sandal keeps them away. So now Conan is pissed off, and he's going back there, and he goes into this scene. Here is the interior of the Neanderthal Eater of the Dead kitchen, where they're hacking up the bodies to feed the people. In the film itself, this was my very, very first character. I play a character like that. They put on different masks on me, and I play, handing down a gutted female body into the guys that cut up bodies. And this is a scene where Arnold sneaks in to capture the princess. So off they go, they capture her, they beat up people, they climb down the tower. This is stuff that wasn't really in the film, with them going into the water. But now, here's a scene that was different than the movie. You see the bow and arrow. In this scene, you see James Earl Jones shoot Sandal while she's on a horse. Now, I was right behind a rock watching this whole scene. And in the scene, he takes an arrow, which was rubber, and he starts to straighten it out. The rubber had like a wire in it. And then it went to a wooden arrow, which he put in the bow itself. And then he shot the arrow. And I almost cracked up because in the scene, you don't see it. The arrow just goes sprung and goes way to the side, not even close to the horse, which is not what they wanted to do anyway. But to me, it was pretty hilarious where this solemn scene of him shooting her took place with his arrow just sprung off the bow in an erratic motion. So in the actual movie, she's on a horseback and gets thrown and gets killed. Now, here's the scene of her on the pyre to burn up. And when Sandal was in this Viking princess outfit, And she and I actually, when we first saw the dead body of her, the simulation of her, she and I were both at the trailer where this was set up, and it was kind of an eerie time for her to look at her dead body. But in the script, it called for the smoke to go straight up. But at 11 o'clock at night at the Mediterranean, which they didn't anticipate, the winds blew, and in the flames you'll see them go, it goes horizontal. For 3 days they filmed, and they couldn't get that quiet night. It was always like at 11 o'clock, they would come and the wind would just blow it horizontal. So that was supposed to be like a solemn smoke going up as a column up to the sky. It didn't work out that way. Now they've got the princess and they're baiting her so Thulsa Doom can come. Now, see, she's barely clad, and I'm actually behind that stone in the film with a coat because it was windy and cold, and every time Milius would go cut, I'd come around and put the coat on her to keep her warm. And then when the scene was ready to take again, I would disappear behind this slab. Now, they're setting up the battle scene, awaiting the horsemen that were going to come. And see the punji stakes? Now, when I asked Terry Leonard that the last 2 weeks of filming would be horse stunts, and I went up to Terry Leonard and I said, Terry, can I be one of these horsemen that were going to be coming in? And he said, do you ride hard? And I go, and I didn't really have that much experience. I go, yeah. And he said, do you ride hard with a spear and a shield? I go, never did that before. He said, okay, tomorrow you'll be up against, you can come to the audition at 8 o'clock tomorrow. We'll be at the sand pits over here. But you'll be up against Spanish riders that have lived in the saddle for 20 years. And these are stuntmen from previous movies, like Clint Eastwood movies. So at 8 o'clock the next morning, no, the day before, he said, go to where the horses are, take the worst horse, because they're going to pick the best horses, and go for a ride. And so I took this horse, and I rode amongst these battle things. This was on a Sunday, before the Monday, before filming, before the audition. And the horse, the handler didn't make the bridle fit close enough. So when I took the horse out of this battle scene area, the horse turned around and sped back to the corral, running and I had to go horizontal on the saddle, pulling on the bridle because he wouldn't stop. And I was passing these punji stakes on full gallop, and it was scary. And as a surfer, I had to calm my mind and stay balanced on the horse so I wouldn't flip off into these things. So the next morning, the audition came, and these horseback riders were making horses fall by pulling the horse to the side. That's how these horses were trained. And no way did I have any of that experience. In fact, for the next 2 weeks, all I did was observe the battle. And if you looked at the horses, and in Spain they got away with using what's called an O-ring, which would be in the front of the horse, and as they galloped, they would pull their legs at a certain point so it would make the horse dovetail. Now, I watched all the stunts very carefully, and none of the horses became hurt. They were like fullbacks that got tackled and shook it off like, oops, I fell. But it was very critical for me to watch every stunt because I was buddies with the stunt coordinator, Terry Leonard, and I wanted to back up his claim that there was no horses or animals hurt. And that was true. So now Arnold fights, and the appearance of Valeria in her hot outfit. It was a beautiful outfit. She looked great in it. So now Arnold gets saved. He gets saved. And again, I'm behind her in the slab, keeping her warm in between takes. And then the movie goes on. And I was there. It was actually on the temple steps that James Earl Jones and his fake head got chopped off. So the movie ends with them walking into the sunset. Consequently, I feel really happy that I went from reading those comic books, trying to fantasize becoming a belly dancer, to earn my money as a barbarian, modern day barbarian. And I want to show you something also. Here is a cover of Frazetta. And after I was reading comic books, then I started to see the novels. And Frazetta and his comic and his artwork was just fantastic. 10 years later, or 8 years later, say, after I read this book, I'm in Madrid getting fitted to do a stunt, and they had that picture, and this was on the door of the fitting room. This is the costume place where I got fitted to fall down the well. But I ripped this off when we were leaving Madrid, Spain. But I thought how significant it was for me to love these Frazetta pictures. And then 6 years later, I'm in the movie taking these things off the wall. Well, the most significant thing for all those comic book writers and fantasy lovers, ultimately, you can look at the fantasy, you can be engrossed with the writings, and like me, I got into the film and got to play act the characters. But to me, the biggest thing that I accomplished was being with Arnold and being with him and training with him and training with the broadsword. I became his fighting friend. Now I'm showing a book that he wrote, and when he wrote it, the publisher sent a copy of it for the first time to Spain, and it arrived on the set. And I was with Arnold when he opened up the package with the book, the first book, the very first book they were sending him. And he opened it up, and he looked at it, and he gave it to me. He said, "Critique this book." So off he went to be in a scene, but I looked at the book, and this is his actual workout plans, how to train, just like he did. And because I was with him, I saw him do these workouts. And of all the things that I want to pass on to all you fantasy lovers is, get this book, follow his workout, make your fantasy a healthy reality. And that's what I learned from being in the film. And this book, to me, has everything you need to know to stay in shape. And when I say this, Arnold knows I do these things, that I recommend things for him. So there. That's my story. Here's the book. Follow his workout, because that's the best message I have for all you fantasy lovers. Stay healthy, be strong, but here is from King Conan himself the recipe to do that. I'll talk to you later.